Hey everyone. Tonight we're journeying into one of history's darkest chapters, a time when the sick were shunned, prayers weren't enough, and hope felt like a distant dream. Welcome to life during the Black Death. We're looking at a grim reality of mass graves, burned homes, and families torn apart by the plague. So, before you get cozy under that warm blanket, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if what I do here genuinely helps you wind down at night. And hey, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it right now? There's something oddly soothing about knowing there are others awake with us, wandering through history together. Now, dim the lights and let the soft glow of your screen pull you deeper. Maybe let a gentle hum fill the background, something steady and calming. Close your eyes slowly and let the noise of today slip away. You're stepping into a world gripped by fear, where the streets run with filth, and survival means hoping the plague passes you by just this once. You live in a medieval village in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You wake up to the sound of a rooster screaming like it owns the world. Your mattress is a burlap sack of ancient straw that hasn't seen a dry day since last spring. You're not sick yet. That's the good news. The bad news? Everyone smells like a damp sheep left out in the sun, including you. But hey, it's peaceful here, at least until someone gets drunk and starts a brawl over who owns a goat. Crime in your village is less like organized and more like accidental. The most common offense? Petty theft. Someone swiped your turnip last week. Not even a good one. It had a wormhole and looked like it was already halfway to compost. But still, the outrage. There was no trial, just a lot of shouting and someone throwing a chicken. Justice here is flexible. There's the Reeve, who basically acts like the village hall monitor, but with more ale and less authority. He once tried to break up a fight using a wooden spoon. It did not go well. Then there's the manor court, held once every few weeks in front of the Lord Steward, who listens to complaints while half asleep, and occasionally fines people half a chicken or 3 days of mucking out stables. Appeals. Cute. You're lucky if he hears your full sentence. And punishment? Let's say it's more about spectacle than results. Someone caught stealing firewood last month had to walk around the village with it tied around their neck, like a hot medieval version of a dunce cap. Another unlucky lad caught with the miller's daughter got a beating and had to scrub the church floor with vinegar and shame. But it's not all thievery and public embarrassment. There are darker things, too. Whispers of poachers in the Lord's forest. A cow poisoned last spring, and everyone pretended not to know why. Once, a traveling tinker was found dead in the ditch. No one asked questions. You all just avoided the spot for a week and then got on with life. And the gossip. Oh, the gossip. It's your village's main form of news, entertainment, and psychological warfare. Someone's chicken stopped laying eggs? Clearly cursed. Someone limping? Must be sins catching up with them. Widow Agnes has a new cloak? Definitely witchcraft. Or she's seducing the Reeve. Possibly both. It's how you find out about everything. Births, deaths, who's sleeping where they shouldn't be, and which pig mysteriously changed ownership in the night. It spreads faster than fire, and often with more damage. Then, one day, the gossip changes. A merchant rides through on a mud-caked horse, stopping for ale and information. He talks too loudly, like all city folk, and mentions a ship in the east. over in the lands where they boil rice and everyone smells like cloves, he says, whatever that means. He says something strange is happening. A sickness. People dying in days. Streets empty. Whole families just gone. You laugh. So does everyone else. Foreigners get all sorts of weird things. Probably bad fish, or bad humors, or God being moody again. You go back to your ale, but the whispers start. A week later, a tattered priest comes through, talking about pestilence in the cities. He warns of God's judgment. Everyone avoids him, mostly because he smells like holy water mixed with failure. Still, he's convincing in that wild-eyed, twitchy sort of way. And he won't stop coughing. That night, you dream of rats. Not that rats are unusual. You live with them, literally. There's a fat one named Gerald who steals crumbs from the hearth and once bit your toe. But in your dream, they aren't just thieving little gremlins. They're swarming, pouring from ships, climbing walls, scratching at doors. Their eyes gleam like tiny black coins. You wake up sweating. In the morning, everything seems normal. Mostly. Except the miller's wife is convinced the moon looked wrong last night. Too red. And someone saw a dog barking at the church steeple. Classic signs, obviously, of something ominous. Still, life goes on. Because what else can it do? You mend nets. You churn butter. You argue about who's responsible for fixing the communal well. A local boy gets caught stealing honey and is made to sit in a wasp-infested shed as punishment. Everyone agrees it's character building. But there's a tension, like a sheep sensing a wolf. The birds are quieter. The dogs won't stop pacing. The wind feels sharp, like it's bringing something behind it. And then there's the mail cart, or what passes for it. It hasn't come in 2 weeks. When the next traveler finally arrives, they look like they've been through hell and dragged it back with them. Gaunt, pale, muttering nonsense about the streets of Messina, about bodies piled high, about doctors in bird masks, about death that arrives with a fever and leaves behind a house of corpses. You tell yourself it's nonsense, city madness, probably drunk. But then someone mentions Genoa, and Venice, and a bishop found dead in his cathedral. The tavern goes silent. And just like that, the gossip turns cold. The laughter fades. And even Gerald the rat seems to be packing his bags. No one says it. Not out loud. But something is coming. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the brittle way the sun sets. For now, your village is untouched. The roads are quiet. The chickens still lay. The reeve is still useless, but not for long. You've just arrived in the thriving Sicilian port of Messina, and it's absolutely crawling with opportunity. And rats. Mostly rats. If the smell of fish guts and fermented human sweat hasn't already introduced you to the harbor, the sound will. The endless creaking of ropes, the clatter of wooden crates, and the scuttling. So much scuttling. You think it's just your imagination until you see it. A rat, bold as sin, staring at you like it owns the dock, because frankly, it does. Behind it, a dozen more, brown, greasy, whiskered little devils, slipping off the gangplanks like seasoned sailors. They aren't here for the view, and neither are you. A merchant ship has just arrived from the Crimea. You overheard someone say it lost half its crew on the voyage. That should probably concern you, but you're too busy admiring the crates of spices and silk being unloaded. They sparkle with the promise of gold. No one pays attention to the rats diving into the shadows. No one notices the fleas on their backs. No one suspects that the real cargo has 8 legs and an appetite for blood. You're here for work. You haul, you lift, you sweat, and you try not to breathe through your nose. There are worse jobs. Well, there will be worse jobs. Right now, you just want to get paid. You share a jug of wine with a dockmate who smells like dried squid and old rope. He mentions the sailors looked sick when they arrived, pale, coughing. One collapsed before his feet even hit the shore. Just scurvy, he says. You nod. You want to believe it. The air is thick with salt, smoke, and something new. Something rotten under the scent of tar and seawater. You glance at a sailor being carried off the ship. His skin is gray, his eyes glassy. You convince yourself he's just tired. A long journey, after all. You've seen worse. Or so you think. By nightfall, the taverns are full. Merchants toasting new deals. Sailors pretending not to be dying. You squeeze into a bench and share bread with a man who's been coughing into his elbow since sunset. Damn ship was cursed, he mutters, voice raspy. 3 of us died before Sicily. Fever. Swellings like eggs. You pretend not to hear that last part. You drink more wine. You laugh too loudly. You tell yourself it's just sailor talk. Tall tales and sea madness. But in the alley behind the tavern, you step over a dead rat and see another twitching in its final moments. Not that unusual, right? Rats die, but this one looks bursting, swollen. You don't know it yet, but that rat is the canary in your medieval coal mine. A week later, someone collapses at the fish market. He has dark blotches on his neck and under his arms. They say he complained of heat and thirst before he started vomiting blood. The local physician blames the warm autumn. Unbalanced humors, he says. He suggests drinking vinegar and placing cut onions on the floor. The man is dead by morning. The ship is still docked. Another has arrived from Genoa. More rats, more sailors. Fewer explanations. No one has any idea what's really going on, but the markets stay open. The money keeps flowing. After all, people die all the time. This is medieval Europe. Life expectancy is basically a dare. You're still showing up for work. You try not to think about how many rats you've seen. You try not to notice the smell that lingers on your hands, no matter how much you scrub. You swear the grain sacks are twitching. Then one of the dock workers vomits blood into the sea. You see it spray out of him like wine from a cracked cask. He falls to his knees, tries to speak, only manages a gasp. You take a step back, then another. You don't even remember running. Just that you kept going until the shouting stopped. That night, someone burns a pile of linens on the dock. You watch from a safe distance. It doesn't help. By morning, there are 2 more corpses by the shipyard. Someone suggests it might be divine punishment. Another swears it's something from the east. No one blames the rats. The rats, after all, are still just part of the scenery. By now, some ships are being refused entry. Cities are starting to panic. But it's too late for Messina. The rats have already spread inland, into the granaries, the shops, the churches. The fleas have found new hosts, human ones. You overhear a priest say it's God's judgment. but you notice even he won't go near the sick. At night, the streets are quieter. Fewer merchants, more moaning behind shuttered doors. You sleep fitfully. You dream of teeth and claws and something crawling beneath your skin. You wake up scratching your ankle. A flea. Just one. You squash it without thinking. You don't know what that flea carried. No one does. Not yet. But something has arrived in Messina. Something hungry. Something invisible. It came not with sword or fire, but in the fur of a stowaway, slipping off a ship from the Black Sea. The dock is quieter now. Fewer ships. Fewer workers. You can smell the sea again, finally. But it smells wrong. Like something bloated has washed up and split open in the sun. You show up anyway. Because that's what people do. They keep moving, keep hauling, keep hoping the tide turns. But deep in the shadows of the crates, the rats are still watching, still twitching, still multiplying. And tomorrow, there will be fewer of you to notice. You're sick. Or maybe not. Maybe your neighbor's third cousin sneezed, and you simply made eye contact. Either way, you've been told to see the local physician, which is like being told to go ask a potato for investment advice. But sure, why not? You're desperate, coughing, and convinced you have demons in your spleen. So you stagger down the street, clutching your side, and enter the medieval equivalent of a clinic. A dark room that smells like garlic, dried herbs, goat, and despair. The physician greets you wearing what can only be described as a wizard cosplay robe. He's been to the university in Paris. For 3 months, he owns a book. One, in Latin. He says it's Galen. You're not sure what that means, but he says it like it's supposed to impress you. He doesn't wash his hands, but he does have a very long feather quill and a serious expression. Surely, this man is a genius. He begins by asking if you've been near any bad air lately. Bad air. That's what they call miasma, invisible poison that leaks from swamps, rotting meat, or your uncle's breath. According to him, the disease isn't in your blood. It's not spread by coughing. It's floating around in the ether like an angry ghost. He waves a pomander, a ball of herbs and flowers, under your nose and tells you to sniff deeply. You do. It smells like regret and wilted basil. Then he asks about your humors, not your mood, your bodily fluids. You see, the human body is controlled by 4 liquids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance them and you're healthy. Tip the scale and you're leaking from every orifice. This is science, 1347 edition. Based on this logic, the doctor decides you have too much black bile. You're melancholic. Obviously, because you live in a rat-infested shack and your family is coughing up blood. The cure? Bloodletting. Time to drain some sadness out of your elbow. He pulls out a knife that looks suspiciously like it also chops turnips, says a quick prayer to Saint Sebastian, and opens a vein. Not a specific one, just whichever one is nearby and plump. You feel woozy, not from healing, from blood loss. He collects the blood in a bowl and squints at it like it's tea leaves. He says gravely. Too dark and bubbly. The stars must be misaligned, because nothing says cutting-edge medical practice, like blaming Orion's belt. Astrology is the other half of his diagnosis. He pulls out a waxy, dog-eared star chart and examines it while muttering about Saturn being in retrograde and Venus having a tantrum. He concludes that Mars is angry. Mars is always angry. Apparently, your spleen is ruled by Mars, and that's why you're dying. You ask if there's a potion, a salve, a miracle cure. He smiles and hands you a pouch of dried toad bits mixed with saffron and something he won't name. Boil this in wine, he says. Drink it at dawn. Face east. Pray. You ask if it works. He nods. It worked for my cousin, until he died. Encouraging. Before you go, he gives you one final piece of advice. Wear a dead weasel around your neck, not for warmth, not for fashion, to scare away the plague. Apparently, the smell of decay repels the miasma. You nod politely and leave, clutching your herbs, your empty purse, and the feeling that you'd have better luck smearing jam on your forehead and waiting for divine intervention. Outside, the air is thick. You look up and see smoke curling from chimneys, a few pigeons glaring at you like they know something you don't. You cough. Again. The blood this time is darker. You wonder if the doctor was right. Maybe your black bile is staging a rebellion. Maybe Mars really is trying to kill you. You pass a group of children jumping rope. One stops to tell you her grandmother was cured by beetles. She ate 5. Roasted. You're not sure if that counts as medicine or a dare. Another man says he drank molten silver. He's dead now, but not from the plague. You hope. Everywhere there are theories. Bathing is suspicious. Or maybe it's not bathing. That's bad, but bathing on Wednesdays. Some say the plague avoids the pious. Others say it's God's punishment for the pious. A friar warns you that sin collects in the lungs, and that confession might help clear it. You confess that you once stole a pear. He says it's probably too late. Back at home, you open your pouch of herbs. The smell hits you like a brick of time and sadness. You boil it in the thinnest wine you own, sip the murky brew, and face east. Nothing happens. You try again. Still nothing. You sniff your armpits. Still dying. You consider the weasel, but the truth is, no one knows what's happening. The physicians, the priests, the peasants, they all have theories, and none of them are right. Not one of them mentions rats. Not one of them blames fleas. Germ theory won't exist for 5 more centuries. So you sit in your smoky hovel, hoping Saturn calms down and your bile levels behave. And that, somehow, you don't get worse tomorrow. Spoiler, you probably will. The sky is doing weird things again. You wake up to the neighbors screaming about a blood moon and a star with a tail, which turns out to be a comet blazing across the sky like God's flaming arrow of disapproval. Old Maud, from 2 cottages over, is already weeping into her apron, muttering about the end of days. Which, to be fair, is kind of her thing. But this time, even the chickens look concerned. It's not just the sky. The crops are failing. Again. The barley turned black. The cabbages melted. And the apples, somehow, are already full of worms before they even fell. People are whispering now. Not casual gossip. Not the usual, "Did you hear what Bert did with the pig?" Number real fear. End of the world fear. Everything feels wrong. Last night, all the dogs in the village started howling at once. Even the blind one that never barks. The old folks say that's a sign. Of what, exactly? No one agrees. Could be war. Could be famine. Could be death. You're hoping it's just a full moon. but your hopes have had a rough year. And now people are talking about the toads. Apparently, someone found 3 of them stuck together, belly to back to belly, in the shape of a triangle. That was enough to send Widow Bren clutching her rosary and shrieking about witches. Which means the witch hunts are probably going to start up again. Which means you better hide that book your cousin brought you from the monastery. The one with drawings of stars and moons. People are not in the mood for astronomy right now. Someone's ox dropped dead in the middle of the road, just keeled over, foaming at the mouth. The local priest blessed the spot, then immediately fell ill. 3 hours later, he was back on his feet, but only walking in circles, humming hymns, backward. Is he possessed? Probably not. But don't bring it up unless you want your face rearranged by his walking stick. The fish stopped biting last week. The river smells off. Even the bees are gone. There's talk that the forest has gone quiet. No birdsong, no deer, no rustling of the underbrush. Just stillness. That kind of silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like something is holding its breath. And then there's the weather. It's too warm, too cold, too wet, too dry. It rained frogs last Wednesday. Not many, just a few, but enough that people still talk about it every time it clouds up. Because what if it happens again? What if that was just the warm-up act? Your cousin Ethel, who reads omens and animal intestines for fun and somehow profit, claims she saw a sheep born with 2 faces. One of them looked exactly like the village bailiff. She said this out loud in the tavern. And now, she's missing 3 teeth and her best goat. Worth it? She thinks so. She's calling it prophecy. You tried to ignore all this. You tried to keep your head down, focus on work, not get swept up in the panic. But then, your dreams started getting weird. You keep seeing fire, screaming, a door slamming shut with your name carved on it. You wake up sweating and unsure if you're more scared of what's coming, or that it might already be here. The church doesn't help. The sermons have gotten intense. Less about loving thy neighbor and more about burning in eternal fire. Brother Anselm has stopped smiling altogether, and he's taken to shouting things in Latin that no one understands. But everyone pretends to, because he's holding a very large crucifix, and you don't want to be accused of heresy. That's the new favorite crime, by the way. Heresy. Anything weird, you say? Heresy. Odd rash on your neck? Heresy. Ask too many questions? Double heresy. We're in a golden age of public panic, and logic has left the building. And the dreams are spreading. Last night, you overheard 2 children whispering about a man with no face standing in the fields. Their mother slapped them both for lying, but they weren't lying. You saw it too. Or thought you did. Or maybe you dreamed it. Hard to tell anymore. The innkeeper saw a black goat with eyes like red coals, and now he's fasting in penance. The butcher's wife started drawing strange symbols in the mud and was chased out of town with brooms and curses. Even the cats are jumpy. Your uncle swears he saw a giant hand reach out of the clouds. He hasn't slept since. And still, no one knows what it is. The signs are everywhere. That much is clear. People agree that something is coming. Something big. But ask 5 villagers what, and you'll get 5 different answers. It's a punishment from God. No, it's the end times. The real end times. It's the Mongols. It's something in the stars. It's probably your bad attitude, actually. Even the local apothecary, who once claimed he could cure baldness with moldy bread and faith, has stopped trying to explain. He just keeps muttering about balance and looking very pointedly at the rats. You'd laugh. But even the laughter sounds nervous now. Something's wrong with the world. Everyone feels it. The birds, the fish, the dogs, the humans. It's like the earth is groaning beneath your feet. And for the first time in your life, no one is arguing about the feeling. It's not just in your head. It's in the air, in the soil, in the sky. And if the omens are right, and they always are, then you should start preparing. Because the Black Death hasn't arrived yet, but it's on its way, and the signs are everywhere. It starts, as all disasters do, with something small, a cough, just a cough. Could be the chill, could be the hay, could be that Oswin the Cooper drank too much ale again and forgot to wear shoes in the frost. You think nothing of it, until the cough turns wet, then red, then constant. Oswin stops showing up to market. That part's not strange. He once disappeared for a full week because he got his foot stuck in a bucket. But then his wife stops coming too. And his youngest daughter, the one with the lazy eye and the runny nose, is suddenly missing from her usual post outside the tavern, where she tries to trade pebbles for apples. That's when the rumors begin. Not the good kind, not the, "Did you hear Father Bernard snores so loud the gargoyles shudder?" kind. These are colder, sharper. A cousin of a shepherd in the next village died in his sleep, they say. And his brother, and their dog, and the neighbor who tried to move the body. You try not to panic. After all, people die all the time. Thatcher Hugh choked on a turnip last week. But this feels different. People aren't just dying, they're vanishing. Whole families, doors closed, chimneys cold, chickens clucking unattended. You pass one house and notice the shutters are nailed shut from the outside. Then Oswin coughs again. You hear it from across the lane. It scrapes the air like a rusted hinge. He hasn't spoken in days, but now he's screaming, loud, wet, gurgling. You don't see him, but you imagine the sores. Everyone is talking about the sores. Black as coal, bubbling up like spoiled porridge under the arms, behind the knees, on the neck. The bailiff comes by and tells everyone not to worry, which is exactly what someone says right before everything goes to hell. It's just the swamp air, he says. Fever from the fog. Keep to your prayers and boil your water. Great. That'll fix it. Boil water, while the man across the road is howling like a wolf on fire. Then someone calls a priest. Not Father Bernard. He left 2 days ago with a donkey and a bag of salted eels, muttering something about divine wrath, and never came back. No, this is a traveling friar, the kind who smells like vinegar and old wool, and preaches with a voice like a cracked drum. He stands in the middle of the square and tells you all, it's because of sin. Sin. That old chestnut. Maybe it's the girls showing ankle. Maybe it's the boys drinking on saints' days. Maybe it's because nobody tithes properly anymore. Whatever it is, he tells you to get on your knees and beg. So, you do. Everybody does. Not because you believe it will help, But because when death has a voice and it's living next door, you try anything. The next day, Oswin's door is open. Just open. No one's seen him come out. No one sees anyone go in. But the wind shifts and the smell leaks. You recognize it instantly. Rot, but not the usual kind. Not goat rot or fish rot. Or even that time someone tried to tan leather in their laundry tub. This is human rot. Sweet, sour, wrong. The bailiff nails the door shut. You ask where Oswin's family is. The bailiff shrugs. Gone. Gone where? Gone how? But no one answers, because it's not just Oswin anymore. It's the blacksmith's boy, the midwife's cousin, the shepherd with the limp, the woman who sells eggs. One by one, they cough, then vanish. Someone suggests digging a pit. Not to bury anyone, not yet. Just to be ready. You help dig it. You tell yourself it's just in case. Just preparation. Like salting meat before winter or patching the thatch before the rains. But you know the truth. You hear a second cough. This time it's closer. It's coming from behind your house. You don't turn around because you know who lives back there and you liked them. So instead, you go inside. You bar the door. You say a prayer. You light a candle. Not for safety. Not even for hope. Just so the dark doesn't win. You're in the middle of the worst event in medieval history, and it hasn't even really started yet. You shut your door. Hard. You bolt it with the rusted iron latch that has held so far through storms, drunk cousins, and that one time a pig got inside. The air outside smells wrong, like iron and mildew and something not quite dead, but almost there. You wedge a bucket under the door crack. You hang sprigs of rosemary and rue over the windows. Lavender if you can afford it, or thyme if you can't. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. No one knows what actually works. But herbs smell better than fear. And right now, your house reeks of both. The street outside used to be loud with gossip, dogs, chickens, and that one neighbor who always yelled at clouds. Now, it's quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It's the kind of quiet that makes you whisper to yourself, just to hear something. You hear coughing next door. Again, louder this time, rattling, wet. The kind of cough that doesn't stop. The kind that shakes the walls and makes you grip your own chest, just to check if you're still breathing fine. You haven't gone to the market in 3 days. You're down to your last onion, 2 turnips, and some bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. But food isn't your priority. Not now. What matters is not dying, which means staying inside, staying quiet, and hoping the plague doesn't knock. And then it does. But not how you think. A knock. 3 short taps on your wooden door. You freeze. You don't speak. You don't breathe. Then a voice. By order of the reeve. Open exclamation mark. You peek through a knothole in the wood. 2 men. One's holding a writ. The other holds a cudgel. They say you've been reported. Reported? For what? For harboring illness. For hiding symptoms. For not reporting a cough heard 3 nights ago by a passing tanner with nothing better to do. You try to say you're fine. That it's just smoke from the hearth. That you've only sneezed once. But the man with the cudgel doesn't look convinced. He has small eyes and a nose like a cracked onion. He looks like he wants you to resist. And here, in this town, in this year, with this plague, you know exactly what comes next. Because avoiding the market? That's fine, Because hanging herbs? That's quaint. But being suspected of sickness and not reporting it? That's a crime. And not just a fine or a scolding crime. Number? It's the kind of crime that gets your door kicked in, that gets your belongings burned, that gets you dragged to the edge of town and chained inside a quarantine shack with 7 strangers and no key. You beg, you plead, you tell them you'll strip naked and dance in the square if they want to check for buboes. You lift your sleeves, show your armpits. You even pull down your hose to show your thighs. Not a lump in sight. But suspicion doesn't need proof. Suspicion just needs noise. And someone made it. They give you a choice. Option 1, come quietly to the magistrate and explain yourself. Under oath. With witnesses. Option 2, stay here and they'll post a red mark on your door, painted in ash and blood. You'll be officially declared a danger, and no one will come near you again. Not even to feed you. You choose option 1. Barefoot, because you can't find your shoes in the panic. They bind your wrists, not tightly, but enough to make it clear you're not a neighbor anymore. You're a suspect, possibly contagious, definitely doomed. As they lead you through the streets, people look away. Some throw up prayers, others spit. A child calls you walking death. You don't even correct her. The magistrate is fat, sweaty, wearing gloves and sitting behind a table too far away to be useful. He asks you 3 things. Have you coughed in the last 7 days? Has anyone in your house shown signs of the pestilence? Do you believe God is punishing this town? You answer carefully. Number. Yes, probably. He scribbles something on a scrap of parchment, looks at you, sighs like he's already bored, then waves his hand. Release them, but burn their bedding, and place a mark. A red smear goes on your door that evening. Not the full cross, not yet, but a warning, a whisper in paint. Now no one will visit, no tradesman will knock, no priest will come, not even to give last rites. And suddenly, staying indoors doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels like a sentence, like a quiet execution. So you do what you can. You scrub, you sweep, you boil water until the pot cracks. You hang more herbs, chant little prayers. You avoid coughing, even when your throat scratches like dry straw. You listen to the silence next door and wonder how many coughs it takes for someone to decide you should die. It starts with Father Anselm, always the first one at the altar, always the last one to leave. He preached mercy, gave stale bread to beggars, and could quote Leviticus from memory. Now he's coughing blood into the sleeve of his cassock, and you know what that means. Everyone knows. He stops coming to morning mass. Rumors spread faster than sermons. By the 3rd day, his door is barred shut from the outside. You don't ask why. Next goes Brother Petrus, the deacon. He'd been carrying the sacrament house to house, saying prayers, giving last rites. Too many houses, too many dead. You saw him collapse in the street yesterday. No one helped him up. He laid there till nightfall. Someone finally dragged him inside, but nobody says who. This morning, he's gone too. Then, it's the gravedigger. Old Mathieu wore the same brown cloak every day for the last 5 years. Said death was just a doorway to Christ. Didn't say what to do when the doorway turned into a floodgate. You watched him bury 6 people before noon yesterday. By sunset, he was in the ground himself. No marker, no prayer, just a mound of dirt too shallow to keep out the dogs. Mass stops. Not that anyone would come anyway. The bells keep tolling, but not for services. They toll for the dead, once for every soul. By midday, your ears ring with the sound of it. You start to hate that sound. It follows you everywhere, like a curse. You can't sleep, because in your dreams, the bells are tolling for you. The church doors are closed now, locked from the inside. Or maybe there's no one left to open them. You peek through the slit in the wood. Pews are empty, altar cloth stained, candles half melted. The Virgin Mary stares at you from a cracked statue with eyes that look more like grief than grace. The holy water has gone stagnant. The font is green with slime. No one blesses themselves anymore. No one dares. You remember the old stories, how relics ward off sickness, how saints protect the faithful. You cling to your rosary so tightly, the beads leave bruises in your palms. Doesn't seem to work. The sickness doesn't care about saints. One night, you see a woman, Elspeth, the baker's widow, sneaking into the chapel. She's dragging her son behind her. His skin is gray, his mouth flecked with foam. He's still breathing, barely. She lays him on the altar. You watch from the shadows. She lights a candle, sobs, prays. The boy dies before the wax melts. She doesn't scream, just lays down beside him and closes her eyes. No one finds them for 3 days. The bishop was supposed to arrive. Said he'd come to lead a procession. Said he'd bring relics, holy oils, a choir. He never shows. Someone says he died on the road. Someone else says he fled to the mountains. Doesn't matter. Either way, the seat is empty. Your parish has no shepherd. Only sheep waiting to die. You try to remember the last sermon you heard, something about fire and judgment. You think it was supposed to be hopeful. It isn't anymore. People start whispering, quiet, panicked things, that God has turned his face, that the devil walks among the sick, that the dead are rising, that the end has already begun. A man tries to ring the bell for his wife, climbs the tower stairs. Halfway up, he slips on pigeon droppings, falls, and breaks his neck. No one retrieves the body. The bell stays silent for a day. Then a boy, no older than 10, tries to climb up and ring it himself. Makes it all the way. 1 toll, 2, falls on the 3rd, lands next to the man. Now both of them are laid in the nave. No one moves them. Not anymore. People stop crossing themselves when they pass the chapel. It doesn't feel holy now. Feels like a tomb. You see a rat gnawing the edge of a Bible. No one stops it. The Word of God is just another thing the plague has chewed through. And still, the bells toll. But now, they're tolling offbeat. No rhythm. No reason. As if the dead themselves are yanking the ropes. Then comes the smoke. Someone sets the rectory on fire. Maybe by accident. Maybe on purpose. The flames eat through the wooden beams. The roof caves in. You hear no screams. No one was inside. Probably. Ash rains down like snow. Children dance in it. Old women weep. No one puts out the fire. Let it burn. Let the whole place burn. That's what they say. Someone hangs a sign on the chapel door. You can't read, but you know what it means. Stay away. That's the new gospel. And still, the bells toll, even with no hands to ring them. You start to wonder, what if they never stop? You're still alive. Unfortunately, you're well enough to witness what walks into town today. Tall, cloaked, and shaped like a walking omen of death, the plague doctor has arrived. And suddenly, every kid stops laughing. Every adult stops pretending it's all under control. Because when the beak shows up, things are officially bad. The doctor is dressed in black from head to toe, like death had a tailor. Thick waxed robes, leather gloves, boots sealed to the knees, and a wide-brimmed hat that would look theatrical if you weren't busy panicking. But it's the mask that stays with you. The long, curved beak stuffed with herbs and flowers, like a duck crossed with a funeral bouquet. Supposedly, the herbs will filter out the miasma, the deadly air. Spoiler, they won't. He doesn't walk fast. Plague doctors never do. Every step is slow and measured, the pace of a man who knows he's already too late. A heavy cane taps the cobbles with each step, not just for support, but to inspect patients from a safe distance, or to whack the desperate ones who get too close. You'd like to believe he's here to save people. He even carries a satchel filled with mysterious instruments, metal probes, scissors, scalpel blades, a few glass vials with things floating inside you'd rather not identify. He looks prepared. He looks professional. He looks like he might actually know what he's doing. That's the terrifying part. Because he doesn't. Plague doctors aren't miracle workers. They're more like the medieval version of hazard signs. When the doctor comes to your village, it means the worst has already happened. It means the church has run out of prayers, the herbalist has run out of herbs, and the undertaker is considering a career change. The doctor isn't here to prevent death. He's here to catalog it. He's not a physician the way you'd understand it. More often than not, he's some underpaid civil servant or local barber surgeon shoved into a bird mask by the mayor. Sometimes he's a young man looking for a quick payday. Other times, he's an old one who already buried his family in figures. Why not? Either way, his qualifications are questionable, his treatments are laughable, and his success rate is somewhere between 0 and divine intervention. Here's what you can expect. Bloodletting to drain the poisoned humors. Lancing of buboes with tools that haven't seen soap since the last famine. Hot onions placed on wounds. Pigeon flesh. A sprinkle of powdered emeralds, if you're fancy. And if none of that works, which it won't, he'll record your death with a scratch of ink and move on to the next. You watch from the shadows as he visits the neighbors. He doesn't knock. He doesn't ask. He just walks in and sometimes doesn't walk out. At one house, a woman screams and tries to shut the door. His cane shoots out like a snake, jamming the frame open. He pushes past her as she sobs, clutching a cloth to her mouth. Inside, a child coughs wetly. You hear him speak once, a low mutter, followed by silence. Outside again, he pauses to look down the road, toward your house. Suddenly, your sore throat feels suspicious. Your head itches. Your heart races. Did you boil your water last night? Did that bread smell odd? You think about your cousin Thomas. He went to the next village 2 weeks ago. Came back pale. Hasn't left his bed since Tuesday. The doctor starts walking. Cane tapping. Beak bobbing. You slam the shutters. People say he's just a man. That he's here to help. but no one opens their doors when he passes. He's not a healer. He's a sign, a warning, the physical embodiment of what everyone already knows, but refuses to say, "You're not getting out of this." He leaves notes nailed to doors, orders from the magistrate. Burn the bedding, seal the windows, bury the bodies, if you can find someone brave enough to do it. He doesn't touch the sick if he can help it. He doesn't cry. He doesn't comfort. He just observes. Later that evening, you see him across the square, his beak tilted toward the horizon as if watching for a storm. In a way, he is. It's just not the kind you can outrun. People whisper about him, say he never eats, that he talks to crows, that he buries coins under the steps of the dead. You don't know if any of that is true, but you do know this. No one walks beside the plague doctor. No one invites him in. And when he finally leaves your village, it won't be because the plague is gone. It'll be because there's no one left to die. And so he walks, one step at a time, a masked figure in the mist. Not death itself, but close enough. You go to bed that night and dream of beaks, of herbs and ash, of footsteps outside your door. You pray he keeps walking. But the prayers are thin these days, and the doctor never knocks twice. You're not dead, yet, which is why the bailiff knocks on your door at dawn with a cart, a shovel, and a look that says you don't have a choice. You've been drafted. Not for war, not for taxes, not even to repair the thatch on the town mill. No, you've been chosen for something far worse. Digging graves, plural, because one grave won't cut it anymore. The graveyard's full. The old priest died 2 days ago, right in the middle of a funeral. Collapsed into the open grave like he wanted to save someone the trouble. Irony is alive and well in 1348. Your orders are clear. Head to the edge of town. Follow the smell. When you reach the pit, stop gagging and start shoveling. The ground is frozen, solid, like the earth itself is tired of swallowing people. Your first few swings bounce off like you're trying to chop an anvil. The spade vibrates in your hands. Your arms already ache, and you haven't even made a dent. Behind you, the cart creaks. You don't look. You don't want to see the bodies yet. Eventually, the frost breaks. Mud and ice give way to slush. You dig like a madman, mostly because everyone else is mad and you'd rather stay ahead of the curve. Another man joins you. He doesn't talk, just grunts and digs. His eyes are sunken. You suspect he's not doing this for the same reason you are. He lost someone, or everyone. Then the cart is opened, and the work changes. They don't look like people, not anymore. They're wrapped in blankets, in cloaks, in whatever cloth was handy. One is just bundled in straw. Another is naked, skin blackened and cracked like roasted meat. The bailiff orders you to move fast. Don't stop. Don't ask questions. No prayers. No names. Just keep going. The living don't have time for sentiment. You drag a body to the pit. You try not to feel the weight, or the way it bends wrong, or the smell. But you do. You feel all of it. You drop the first one in and turn back. And again. And again. You try not to remember who these people were. That one could have been the baker. That one might be the woman who sold eggs every Tuesday. You don't want to know. Knowing hurts. Knowing makes it real. One of them shifts when you lift him. You drop him. You swear. The bailiff kicks the body. No movement, just air escaping. You try to laugh it off, but your laugh sounds like a dying bird. At some point, the other digger vomits. He keeps digging afterward. Respect. By midday, your arms are jelly and your back is on fire. The cart goes back for more. You sit on your shovel. You eat a crust of bread. It tastes like dirt. Everything does now. A child is in the next load. Small, wrapped in a scarf with a little wooden horse tied around it. Someone loved them. Someone tried. The horse goes in with them. You don't speak. You just lower them in and shovel quickly. Too quickly. You don't want to look at that one. A priest eventually arrives, not to pray, to count. He scratches notes on parchment, no names, just tallies. You ask what for. He shrugs. Records, maybe. Maybe for God. Maybe just to pretend someone is watching. By afternoon, the pit is half full. You add lime. It burns your nose. You try not to think about why it's used. You already know. Everyone does. You hear someone say there's talk of burning bodies now. Too many to bury. Not enough ground. Not enough time. Another man drops from exhaustion. You check for boils. Nothing yet. He gets water and a slap and is told to keep going. You wonder when it'll be you. You start hearing whispers that the plague isn't natural, that it's punishment, that it was brought by strangers. You ignore it. The dead don't care what you believe. The dead just pile up. A noble son is in the next load. You know because he still has rings on his fingers. No one dares steal them. Not because of respect. Because no one wants to touch the body longer than they must. Even gold isn't worth that gamble. Toward dusk, the wind picks up. You wrap your cloak tighter. Your skin feels wrong, dry and tight and itching. You scratch until you bleed. You tell yourself it's just the cold. The bailiff says you're done for the day. The pit is full. Tomorrow, a new one. Somewhere else. Maybe closer. Maybe farther. Depends on where the next cluster dies. You wash your hands in the stream. You scrub them raw. But the stink lingers. In your nails. Your skin. Your memory. You walk home. Past shuttered windows. Past doors marked with red crosses. Past empty homes. You crawl into bed. You don't sleep. You just close your eyes and pretend you're not there. Tomorrow, you dig again. You are the mayor. The city's highest authority, the one with the cursed responsibility of shutting the gates tight. No one leaves. No one enters. The plague has come to town, and it's your job to lock it in. It's the worst kind of power. You stand atop the walls, watching the heavy wooden gates close with a finality that echoes like a death knell. Behind you, the town murmurs, half in panic, half in anger. Outside, the world keeps turning. But for those trapped inside these walls, life has turned into a waiting game, with death as the dealer. You think the gates will protect you? Fool. The rats are already inside, and the sickness rides them like cruel messengers. The city walls are no shield against the invisible enemy creeping through every corner. The plague spreads anyway. At first, people begged for mercy. "Open the gates, let us flee," they shouted. But there is no fleeing from this. You shut the gates tight, because letting even one infected soul wander risks the entire region. Now the city is a cage. You've locked in fear, hunger, and death. Food starts to run low. The merchants who once supplied your market stalls are either dead or too afraid to travel the roads, now slick with mud and carrion. The granaries creak, and the empty barrels echo like hollow bones. Every day, you count the dwindling sacks of grain as if it's the last prayer you'll say. Inside, tempers flare faster than the plague's fever. There are whispers, rumors, accusations flying like arrows. Hoarding is a crime, but who has the energy to care about laws anymore? Desperation breeds theft. People break into storage rooms, snatch whatever they can, and disappear into the alleys. You, the mayor, are supposed to keep order, but your guards are stretched thin. They're fighting exhaustion, grief, and their own fear. Every night, someone tries to sneak out, looking for food or escape, or both. When they're caught, the punishment is swift and brutal. Sometimes death, sometimes public humiliation in the square. The law is the law, even if it feels more like a noose tightening around everyone's neck. And crime doesn't stop at theft. With the gates locked, the plague doesn't just bring sickness. It drags out the worst in people. People who once bowed politely now snarl and threaten. Fear makes neighbors enemies. And the deadliest crimes aren't just the ones you can see. Some take to violence. When food runs out, families grow desperate. Brawls break out over scraps. Some stab with knives, others with clubs stolen from workshops. The streets, once places of barter and chatter, become battlegrounds. Others commit worse sins, crimes that, in a less desperate time, would bring the gallows for sure. You hear about the charnel houses, makeshift places where bodies pile like logs. The grave diggers, overwhelmed and terrified, have started stealing from the dead. Rings, coins, even pieces of clothing. It's morbid thievery, but with everyone afraid to touch a corpse, the risk seems worth the reward. Worse still, rumors swirl of people poisoning wells to keep others out. Accusations fly like sparks. Jews, foreigners, beggars blamed for curses and poison. The fear turns into rage. You know from other towns what happens next. Scapegoats dragged from their homes, beaten, burned. You refuse to let that happen here, but the mob's fury is a fire you can barely smother. Your warnings fall on deaf ears. In the darkness, people whisper about witches. Women and men accused of conjuring the plague with curses. Trials happen in secret. The accused are tortured until they confess. Then they are burned at the stake, a grim spectacle meant to reassure the living. But it only feeds the cycle of fear and death. Every night, the church bell tolls for another victim. The sound grows heavier, almost unbearable. The town is full of sick people, coughing, fevered, delirious. Those who can still move hide away, afraid to be dragged to the plague hospital, or worse, left outside the city walls to die alone. As mayor, you watch helplessly as death becomes the most regular visitor. You mark the days by the number of crosses hammered into wooden doors, signaling the departed. The living eye each other with suspicion, wondering who's sick, who's hiding symptoms, who might be next. And there is no cure, no magic, no prayers answered. Inside the city walls, society unravels. You try to maintain order, but the plague is a thief that steals everything. Food, hope, neighbors, even law. Public markets shrink into shadows of themselves. The town crier no longer calls cheerful news, but warnings. Stay inside. Avoid the sick. pray for mercy. The wealthy retreat behind locked doors, guarded by armed men who enforce quarantine with cruel hands. But even they cannot buy immunity. The plague ignores money. The poor grow even poorer, shunned and forgotten. Some try to flee through secret tunnels or scaling the walls, risking being shot by your guards. Others starve quietly in their hovels. And yet, amid the despair, crime flourishes. The desperation pushes people to do unthinkable things: theft, murder, black market trading of food and medicine. False healers set up tents, selling charms and potions that do nothing but drain coins. You arrest some, but your jail is overflowing and the guards too few. Bribery becomes common. A sack of grain here, a favor there. The law bends, breaks, then crumbles under the weight of misery. One evening, a group of starving townsfolk break into a closed bakery. The baker had barricaded the door days ago, but hunger is louder than locks. They smash windows, steal what little flour remains. The baker curses them, but you can't blame the desperate. You try to keep the peace, but every day feels like walking a knife edge. The city's clergy, once the soul of comfort, are also struck down. Priests and monks succumb to the plague or flee. Without their guidance, superstition fills the void. People seek out witches, heretics, and mystics. Violence against the accused increases. Even the town council has fractured. Meetings are tense. Some demand harsher punishments, others plead for mercy. You struggle to keep them united, knowing every decision could spark rebellion. And rebellion is the last thing you need. Your heart aches with every death, but the hardest burden is knowing you can do little. You locked the gates to protect the surrounding lands, but inside your city, it's as if the plague itself is the real ruler. In the end, locking the gates was a sentence, not just for those outside, but for everyone trapped within. No one escapes this prison, least of all you. So as you sit alone in your chamber, the city moaning beyond your walls, you realize the cruel truth. Sometimes leadership is about holding on while everything you love falls apart. Because out there, beyond the gates, life moves on. But here, in the plague-locked city, death has made itself at home. You've survived the cold, the rats, and the coughing neighbors. Now, it's time for the highlight of your day, an appointment with the local barber surgeon. Forget what you think about barbers just giving haircuts. In medieval Europe, your barber is also your surgeon, dentist, and part-time executioner. Because in 1348, when the Black Death is knocking at your door, medicine isn't a science. It's guesswork, superstition, and a lot of sharp metal. Your doctor won't wear a white coat or carry a shiny scalpel. Nope. He'll show up with a rusty blade, an unwashed apron, and hands dirtier than the streets outside. He might smell faintly of ale and bad breath, all signs of a professional. Let's be clear, this isn't a day spa treatment. This is pain therapy, medieval style. The plague has already done a number on you. Swollen lymph nodes turning into grotesque, blackened boils called buboes. They ooze, they burn, and they scream death in a language only God and rats understand. But here's the kicker. Your barber surgeon is here to help by slicing open those boils and draining them. Because what better way to treat a disease no one understands than by cutting into it with a blade so blunt it might as well be a butter knife? The first crime? Consent is a laugh. You don't get a choice. When the barber surgeon arrives, you're the patient and he's the law. Refuse? Good luck convincing your neighbors not to throw you out or report you to the local lord for being a pestilence. This is medieval medicine, where your body is considered communal property during a plague. If your buboes burst on their own, they say you're too weak to fight. If they don't, the barber surgeon will make them burst, one way or another. He begins by rubbing your skin with a rag dipped in vinegar and herbs, more for show than any real cleanliness. Next comes the blade. Rust flakes off onto your skin as he presses down, slicing open your flesh without anesthesia. There's no numbing, no mercy. The stench of blood mixes with the bitter scent of herbs and sweat. You scream, you cry, but don't expect any sympathy. This is routine. Sometimes he will attach leeches, those tiny blood-sucking worms, to your skin. They are meant to draw out the evil humors. Leeches sound gross now? Try having dozens attached to your arms or neck, biting and swelling until they drop off, leaving behind raw wounds that attract flies and dirt. And here's the kicker. The barber surgeon's tools are never cleaned, maybe wiped on a rag soaked in more vinegar. But bacteria? Germs? No one even knows what those are yet. Your open wounds become a welcome mat for infection. And if you survive the plague itself, you might still die from the cure. In truth, many barber surgeons were little more than grifters or village lunatics playing with knives. They weren't licensed doctors. Formal medical training was rare, and books were expensive. Most knowledge came from folklore, superstition, and whatever your great uncle told you once while drunk. So here you are, lying on a wooden table, trying not to flinch as the barber slices open a bubo the size of a small apple. The blood gushes, dark and thick. You gag from the smell. The barber mutters a prayer and spits on your wounds. A blessing that likely spreads more germs than good. But wait, there's more. Once the boils are drained, the barber might stuff the open sores with poultices, a disgusting mixture of herbs, mud, animal fat, and sometimes even manure. The idea is to draw out the poison. What it really does is make your wounds stink so badly that even the rats avoid you, and nearby villagers cross to the other side of the street. If you thought that was the worst, you're not done yet. The barber might recommend bloodletting next. That's right. If your blood is too full of evil, the cure is to drain it all out, literally. Using the same rusty blade or a sharp piece of bone, he'll slice a vein open, usually in your arm, and tie a crude leather strap above to slow the flow. The goal is to bleed you out until your skin turns pale and your knees buckle. Why? Because medieval doctors believed disease was caused by an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Bleeding was supposed to restore balance, except it didn't. It just left you weaker. Sometimes they inserted leeches for this purpose too. Those disgusting creatures were the medieval equivalent of a medical miracle and a source of endless infections. You may be lucky to have a barber who only cuts and bleeds. In some towns, more advanced treatments involve lancing boils with hot needles, scraping the skin to release toxins, or using cauterization, burning your flesh with a heated iron. This was torture disguised as treatment. Pain was the only guarantee. And death? Well, that was often the outcome too. Between the plague, The filth, the starvation, and the medicine. It's a miracle anyone made it through. Here's where the line blurs from medicine to crime. While the barber surgeon technically had permission from local lords to perform treatments, there was no oversight, no quality control, no ethics committee. Every day, innocent people fell victim to malpractice that today would be criminal assault or worse. Yet back then, a botched bloodletting or infected lanced boil was just bad luck or God's will. Families lost members not just to plague, but to the deadly cures. And let's not forget about the black market. When desperation struck, some desperate villagers turned to traveling healers who sold charms, poultices made from unknown ingredients, and potions guaranteed to cure the plague. Many were outright frauds, selling poisons or nothing at all. If you were unlucky enough to trust one, you might be left worse off, or dead. Now, as you lie there, blood seeping from your wounds and flies buzzing around, you might wonder, how did people even survive this? The answer is complicated. Some had strong immune systems. Some fled to remote villages. Some were lucky enough to be treated by barbers who at least avoided the worst of the tools. But most died. And those who survived carried scars, physical, emotional, and spiritual, for life. So when you finally stagger up from the barber's table, bleeding, raw, and smelling like a cesspit, remember, this was medicine in 1348. Pain and death were part of the bargain. If you complain or refuse treatment, you might be accused of witchcraft or heresy, crimes punishable by execution, because in times of plague, fear breeds suspicion, and suspicion breeds cruelty. So next time you see a barber in a red and white striped pole, remember, it wasn't just haircuts and shaves. It was blood, pain, and the sharp edge of medieval survival. And you just survived bloodletting and boils. Now, you've just decided that whipping yourself in public is a perfectly reasonable response to an invisible, soul-melting horror sweeping through every town and village you've ever heard of. No, really. That black-robed procession of chanting, barefoot lunatics parading down the muddy road, you're in it now. Welcome to the flagellant movement. Your new hobbies include guilt, bruises, and crying while bleeding. Why? Because clearly God is angry. Angry at who? Doesn't matter. Angry at everyone. At you, specifically. At the way your cousin snored. At the midwife's weird mole. At the world in general. The priests are dying. The nobles are hiding. The doctors are baffled. So naturally, the solution is to strip off your shirt, grab a knotted rope, and start swinging. Hard. You march through town squares, dusty alleys, and past confused chickens, flaying yourself like a sack of potatoes in a hailstorm, while everyone watches with some combination of horror and begrudging admiration. You are now the main event at the medieval equivalent of daytime television. There are rules, of course. There's a rhythm, a chant, a holy order to this madness. One man up front holds a wooden crucifix. Others recite hymns in Latin that half the group doesn't actually understand. You take off your outer clothes to reveal your pale, increasingly bloody back. Then in unison, you all whip yourselves. 1, 2, 3, keep going. 10, 15, until your flesh breaks open like overripe fruit. It stings. Oh, it stings like a wasp in your soul. But that pain's supposed to be the point, because somewhere between agony and dehydration, you hope God notices. That maybe he'll say, all right, that's enough bubonic plague for now. These people clearly feel bad about whatever this was about. Some towns cheer you on, others throw vegetables, sometimes both. People line the roads as you pass, some sobbing, some clutching relics, others just enjoying the spectacle like it's medieval dinner theater. You're supposed to stay humble. You're not allowed to touch women, or smile, or sleep indoors. You must eat little, pray often, and keep your eyes low. But here's the twist. Joining this group might actually get you executed. Yes, really. Turns out, the church isn't thrilled about roving bands of freelance sinners handing out salvation without clerical approval. At first, they tolerated it. The Pope even looked the other way for a while. After all, desperate times call for bleeding men with ropes, apparently. But when flagellants started preaching their own doomsday messages and ignoring church authority, the Vatican flipped faster than a pancake on Easter. Now you're not just a penitent, you're potentially a heretic. That's bad. Being a heretic in the 14th century is like being the last guy holding a torch in a fireworks factory. All it takes is one bishop in a bad mood to declare your entire march a cult. Suddenly, those cries for mercy sound a lot like blasphemy. And you, poor bleeding you, might find yourself arrested by the Inquisition, tossed in a dungeon that makes your peasant hovel look like a spa, and asked some very firm questions with very sharp tools. But you don't know that yet. Right now, you're just trying not to pass out from blood loss while singing about salvation in the rain. Your feet are blistered. Your back looks like it lost a bar fight. And the smell? Let's just say it's a heady bouquet of sweat, iron, and spiritual desperation. At night, you lie in barns or under carts, wrapped in nothing but rough wool and regrets. Your fellow flagellants whisper about visions, about angels, about fire in the sky and cleansing floods. Someone's convinced the world will end in 1349. You don't argue. Honestly, you kind of hope they're right. And yet, something keeps you going. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's the weird new rhythm your life has taken on. Morning pain, afternoon chants, evening silence. Repeat, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. Something holy. Something that might, just maybe, save your soul. Or maybe you're just too exhausted to stop. Because the real punishment isn't the plague. It's the not knowing. It's waking up every day wondering who died in the night. It's watching children collapse. It's smelling the rot on the wind and wondering how much longer you have before your body joins the rest. So you whip, and you bleed, and you pray. Not because it works, but because it's something to do. Something to fight the silence. And in this world, silence is always a bad sign. So, march on, flayed pilgrim. Just try not to march too close to Rome. They've got inquisitors, and they're not big fans of unsanctioned repentance parties. The whispers start soft, like gossip, like wind, a snatched phrase in the market, a muttered theory at the alehouse, a sideways glance when someone coughs. At first, it sounds like nonsense. The plague is caused by bad air, or maybe by the stars, or by eating eel on a Friday. But then the stories sharpen. The looks get longer. The talk grows teeth. And suddenly, someone points a finger at the Jews. Congratulations, you live in the 14th century, a time when understanding of disease is basically medieval WebMD minus the web. So when people die in droves, when your neighbors collapse foaming and blotched, And when your priest starts quoting Revelations more than the Gospels, you need a reason, a face, a villain. Logic is optional. Blame is essential. And so, it must be the Jews. They're different. They don't get as sick. They live close together. They don't eat pork. They speak other languages. They read strange books. They wash their hands more often, which clearly is suspicious. Why else would someone not be dying like the rest of us? It begins with rumors. A well in Switzerland is poisoned. A child in Savoy claims a man in a dark robe dropped something into the town cistern. A woman in France swears she saw a rabbi throw powder into a river. It doesn't matter that none of it makes sense. Sense is irrelevant. Fear is running the show now. You hear it first in your town square. A friar preaching in the open air, waving his arms like he's trying to swat God himself. He says, the end is near. He says, God is punishing you, and that the ones responsible are the ones who killed his son. Subtle. Next come the lists. Names read aloud, accusations scribbled in charcoal on doors, a black mark left on a threshold, maybe your neighbor's house, maybe yours. The town scribe says there's going to be an investigation, which is 14th century code for get ready to die. Trials follow, if you can call them that. You're dragged into the square. No lawyer, no chance. Just loud questions, louder accusations, and maybe a priest quoting Leviticus out of context. If you're lucky, you confess quickly. If you're unlucky, you insist you're innocent. That never ends well. Torture is standard. Waterboarding before it had a name. The rack, thumbscrews, burning irons. It's not about finding truth. It's about forcing a story that fits. If you don't talk, you die. If you do talk, you die slightly faster. And now, your friends and family are also suspects. It's a real lose-lose kind of day. Once a few people confess, and they always do, the authorities have their proof. The plague wasn't random. It was planned, coordinated, a conspiracy. And those who are blamed, they are marched into the square. No trial this time. Just the flames. You stand in the crowd. The air smells like smoke and hair and something worse. People are cheering. Some are praying. Some are throwing rocks. You try not to watch, but you can't look away. A man is tied to a stake. He's singing something in Hebrew. A woman clutches her child until both are pulled apart. This isn't justice. It's theater. Gruesome, public theater. And you bought a front row seat. Afterward, there's silence. People shuffle home. The ashes blow down the street. And someone says, maybe now the plague will stop. It doesn't. The Jews who survive flee, or try to. Some hide in cellars, in forests, in sympathetic Christian homes. A few convert to save their lives, but everyone knows a convert is just a Jew with a different hat. The pogroms spread. From town to town. France, Germany, Spain. Entire communities are wiped out in days. Not by the plague, by their neighbors. And you? You're not sure how to feel. You didn't light the torch. You didn't swing the club. But you stood there. You listened. You let it happen. Maybe you even nodded along when someone said, they don't die like we do. It felt like logic at the time. It feels like guilt now. The next day, the priest thanks God. The bishop says the town is cleansed. The mayor declares a day of fasting and prayer. You eat stale bread and pretend your stomach isn't sick. At night, you dream of screams. You think you see soot on your hands when you wake up. And still, the plague rolls on. Turns out it wasn't the Jews, or the stars, or the cursed well. Turns out it was fleas, on rats, on boats, on carts, on people. But you'll learn that centuries later. For now, you wrap your cloak tighter. Avoid the town square. And when someone new arrives in town, you don't meet their eyes. You know how this goes. The fire is always looking for its next scapegoat. Now, you've been selected for the most exclusive club in the 14th century, the Plague House. Entry is simple. Someone in your home starts coughing black gunk, bleeding from weird places, or looking vaguely corpse-ish. That's it. One cough too many. And boom, the door's barred. You're not going anywhere. Ever. The red cross painted on your door isn't festive. It's not a decoration. It's not a medieval art project. It's a warning. The town warden slaps it on with a pot of paint and a 6-foot pole because getting within touching distance of your family now counts as a death wish. And in crimson letters beneath the cross, God have mercy on us. It's not graffiti. It's your new last name. Outside, people start avoiding your street like it's made of lava. Bread is tossed from a distance. No one knocks. If the cat gets stuck inside, well, that cat now lives with the sick. The quarantine clock starts ticking. 40 days. Or until everyone inside dies. Whichever comes first. Inside, things go downhill fast. It's a house, technically. A small wooden room with a dirt floor, one window nailed shut, and exactly 0 air circulation. You're sharing this quarantine with your sick cousin, your uncle who's probably faking it, and your baby sister who hasn't cried in 2 days. You try not to breathe too deeply, but breathing shallowly also just feels like dying slower. The symptoms aren't polite. They don't knock first. They crash through the door and hit hard. First the fever, then the swellings. Big black lumps in your armpits, your groin, your neck. Then the retching, the bleeding. Your brother's skin starts turning purple like a spoiled plum. He dies before nightfall. Nobody touches the body. Why? Because touching him is a crime. Not legally, maybe, but according to the new law, the one whispered by everyone, if you help the sick, you become the sick. Sympathy is treason. Compassion is suicide. So you do what everyone else does. You step over the corpse. You avoid his eyes. You try not to look at his hands, still clutching the rag he used to wipe his mouth. The floor creaks under his weight. No one moves him. The body count is now part of the furniture. The food situation is worse than the smell. Remember pottage? That sticky stew of barley, onions, and disappointment? It's gone. You're living off old bread that tastes like sawdust and hope. The well water smells like frogs. Your teeth feel loose. Your stomach growls. And your hands shake when you try to split the last apple. 4 ways. That apple was for the goat. The goat is dead. You try to sleep, not because it helps, but because consciousness is overrated. But sleep is just another form of torture now. Your dreams are feverish things, full of coughing fits and whispered prayers. You wake to the sound of your aunt screaming at the wall. Or maybe she's screaming at nothing. Or maybe she finally saw the angel everyone talks about. Either way, she stops making noise a few hours later. You think about escape. You think about slipping through the shutter at night, running for the woods, becoming a bandit. You could live on roots, on berries, on deer you don't know how to catch. But then you remember the watchmen. They patrol the alleys. They've got long poles and short tempers. Anyone caught leaving a plague house is treated like a fire. They don't contain it. They stamp it out with cudgels and fire, sometimes both. So you stay, and the house becomes your prison, your church, your grave. You're not allowed to bury the dead. That's someone else's job. But they're not coming for a while. Weeks, maybe. So the bodies stay and rot and swell. You cover your nose with rags soaked in vinegar. Doesn't help. Your sister cries once, then doesn't cry again. You talk to the walls. You count the cracks in the ceiling. You watch the light move across the dirt floor, then back again. One day blends into the next, into the next, into the next. Time isn't measured in hours anymore. It's measured in coughs, in bodies, in silence. By day 20, your house smells like a battlefield that lost. By day 30, you've stopped hoping. The world has forgotten you. Your neighbors crossed the street weeks ago and never looked back. The baker's boy used to toss crusts through the shutter. He doesn't anymore. You think you saw him coughing last week. Then, one day, you open your eyes and there's no sound. No coughs, no cries, no breathing. You are alone. And that is when the knock comes, a real one. Not in your dreams this time. A gloved hand, a masked figure, a plague doctor. You barely remember how to speak. He leaves food. He doesn't look at you. He paints over the red cross. The door creaks open. You step outside for the first time in 40 days. The light hits your eyes like a slap. The street is quiet. You are thinner, dirtier, quieter. The same person, technically, but something vital inside you has gone still. Congratulations. You survived the quarantine house. Not that you'll ever forget it. You just spotted a traveler approaching your village. Once upon a time, you'd have run out to meet them. Maybe offer a bit of bread and wine, even share a corner of your fire. Travelers were welcome, messengers of news, carriers of stories from distant places. But those days are long gone. Now, you slam the shutters, you hide your children, you whisper prayers and cross yourself, even though you barely believe they'll help. The stranger's shadow falls like a curse over your doorstep, because everyone knows what a visitor might bring with them. The fever. It's the Black Plague, after all, and it's changed everything. Hospitality, dead, kindness, fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Fear is the new law, and with fear comes suspicion, and suspicion is a crime that can get you killed faster than the fever itself. You watch the traveler stumble along the muddy road. Their cloak is ragged, stained with weeks of travel, and who knows what else. Their eyes dart nervously, because they've heard the rumors too. This village won't welcome them. Not anymore. Not since the sickness began its cruel march. You don't want to be a monster. You want to be decent. But decency is dangerous now. The stranger is a walking accusation, a living threat, and you can't risk it. Not your family, not your fragile home, not your life. So you stay silent behind the shutters. You pretend you don't see. Maybe you don't even recognize the face in the dirt and exhaustion. Maybe you want to forget that once you'd have welcomed this soul like a brother, Because now, in the plague years, that traveler is a suspect, a potential carrier of death. The fear isn't just in your heart, it's carved into every law, every whispered conversation, every grim nod exchanged in the market square. If the stranger breathes near your home, if they cough or sneeze or simply look too tired, well, that's enough to brand them a plague bearer. And what happens to plague bearers? They get locked away, exiled, sometimes dragged into the woods and left to die, or worse. You've seen it before. The village constable, eyes hard as flint, dragging a poor soul down the lane, shouting accusations over the terrified protests. The neighbors gather, some with pity, most with something darker, a grim satisfaction that justice is being done. Justice? It's survival. When death is so close, mercy is a luxury no one can afford. You remember the story of old Merrick, the traveler from the next town over. He came looking for work, for food, maybe shelter. But no one would open their doors. They whispered that he coughed in the tavern, that his skin was pale, and his hands trembled. The village council sentenced him to isolation, but he disappeared into the woods one night, found days later with black sores spreading like ink across his flesh. They buried him without ceremony. No prayers, no farewell. Just a hole in the ground and a warning. Don't bring death to our doorstep. And the fear? It didn't end with Merrick. It spread. Every new face was eyed like a serpent, every knock at the door a threat. Even your neighbors grew suspicious of each other. The thin line between caution and cruelty blurred. Because in a time when the plague rules, fear becomes the lawmaker, and cruelty the enforcer. There are whispers, too, about those who would exploit the fear. Accusations fly of travelers poisoning wells, of strangers hiding secret sins, of merchants selling cursed goods. Some say it's superstition. Others believe it's a desperate truth. In the chaos, accusations become weapons. To accuse someone of bringing the plague is to sentence them to exile or death. And once the fear takes hold, it's hard to tell if the plague or paranoia is more deadly. You hear the story of Tom, the cobbler's apprentice, who was accused because he greeted a traveling peddler with a smile. The peddler fell ill days later, and Tom was blamed. Locked in a cellar, left with only bread and water. He disappeared within a week. No one knows if it was the plague or starvation that killed him. The rules are clear, though. No contact, no greetings, no shared food. If a stranger shows up, you don't open the door. You barricade it. But what about the stranger's crimes? Because yes, the plague turned fear into crime. Offering shelter, a capital offense. Sharing bread, a deadly risk. Ignoring quarantine, execution. It wasn't just the fever they feared. It was the human touch that might spread it. In this world, breaking quarantine is the ultimate crime, and the punishment is swift, brutal, and public. There are stories whispered in the marketplace of a man caught sneaking out of the plague quarantine, trying to see his wife. The village council sentenced him to hang from the gallows, his body left dangling for days as a warning. No tears, no pleas, just the cold, hard rule of survival. You wonder if any of those punishments feel just. or if they only deepen the darkness gripping your village. The plague doesn't just kill bodies. It kills trust. It destroys community. It turns neighbors into enemies and kindness into suspicion. You remember when, weeks ago, a family tried to hide their sick daughter. They thought they could nurse her in secret. But someone saw, whispered the secret, and the family was dragged before the council. Their punishment was exile from the village, forced to wander into the wilderness without supplies or shelter. No one knows if they survived. That's the cost of fear, the crime of compassion. Sometimes you catch yourself looking over your shoulder, wondering if someone suspects you of harboring a stranger. The slightest cough, the faintest fever, the smallest kindness can become a death sentence. You live in a world where fear is law, and every stranger is a potential criminal simply by existing. And you've become a silent judge, jury, and executioner. But maybe, just maybe, you still hold on to a shred of hope that one day the traveler won't be a threat, the stranger won't bring death, and hospitality will return from the grave where it's been buried these dark years. Until then, you stay behind the shutters. You keep your children close, and you pray for your village, for the stranger, and for a mercy that feels as distant as the church bells echoing over the fields. Because tonight, fear is the only guest invited in. And the crime? Simply being the stranger who knocks. You're the harbor guard, crossbow slung heavy over your shoulder, standing watch on the muddy docks. The salt air bites at your lungs, but your mind is locked tight on the approaching ships, their blackened sails sagging like the hopes of the desperate men aboard. You see them coming through the mist, the plague ships. Again, the ports were supposed to be closed, locked down, quarantined. But here they come, anyway. The town council sent you here with strict orders. No one gets in. No exceptions. No matter who pleads or begs or threatens. Not this time. And yet, the sailors wave their arms frantically, shouting hoarsely from the decks. Some clutch bloody rags over their faces. Others lean on makeshift crutches or stagger with fever too fierce to hide. You catch glimpses of bodies, slumped against the rails, eyes vacant, skin mottled black and purple. Death's calling cards. You have a choice. Let them dock and risk the plague crawling into your streets, or turn them away, dooming them to rot at sea. The cold wind whistles through the ropes and pulleys of the ships. You shift your weight, feeling the rough wood of the dock splinters press into your boots. Behind you, the town waits. Women clutch children tighter. Merchants shutter their stalls. Priests pray in the shadows, their voices trembling. You grip your crossbow tighter, trying to push down the lump in your throat. It's not like you want to be cruel, not like you enjoy watching people die. But if the plague slips past you, it won't be just these sailors. It'll be everyone. And you'll be the one who opened the gate. The captain of the nearest ship throws his hands up. "Please," he rasps, voice raw from fever and desperation. "We have supplies. Food, cloth. We'll pay. We swear it. Just a moment on your dock." Behind him, a woman wails. A man coughs so hard it sounds like his lungs are breaking. You glance down. On the deck, a heap of bodies lies tangled together. They're calling for help. for mercy, for anything but the cold sea. You know the law: no contact, no mercy, no exceptions. Your fellow guards nervously whisper behind you. Some clutch pikes, others peek anxiously from behind barrels. The air thickens with tension, fear coiled tight like a spring. And then you hear it, the crack of wood splintering. One sailor, too weak to stand, has slipped off the gangplank and tumbled into the water. His hands claw desperately at the dock's edge. He looks up at you, eyes wide, pleading. You could reach out a hand, pull him up, save a life, but you don't. Instead, your fingers curl around the bolt in your crossbow. A shout rises from the crowd. "Don't! He's cursed!" Because he is. All of them are. The plague isn't a whisper or a shadow. It's a roaring, gnashing beast that kills with no favor. You take a step forward, raising your crossbow just as the captain yells again. "We're not plague-ridden. Please believe us. We escaped from worse." But you know the truth. This isn't escape. It's death chasing them down like a hound. And soon, it will be knocking on your town's door. Your heart pounds in your chest. You tighten your grip on the crossbow. The sailors' desperate faces blur with the mist. The shouts, the coughing, the wails, all fading into a terrible silence as you make your choice. You shout back, voice firm but heavy. No one comes ashore. Turn your ships around, or we'll fire. The captain's face falls, his shoulders slump, but some men shout curses and threats. They slam their fists on the railing, their hunger for life fierce and wild. Suddenly, a sickly figure moves toward the gangplank, staggering but determined. A child, no older than 7, with hollow cheeks and fever-glazed eyes. They reach out to you, trembling. "Please." The child gasps. "Help." Your fingers tremble too. But the law is clear. You can't risk it. Not even a child. You lower your crossbow, voice cracking. "Go back!" A cry rises from the ship, anger, despair, hopelessness, all tangled together. Then a splintering sound. One of the sailors tries to drop a rope ladder. Another pulls a rusty knife, threatening to cut it loose. The dock guards shift, hands on weapons. You can feel the weight of every eye in the town on you, waiting. You're the gatekeeper between life and death. And in a moment like this, your choice is no longer about mercy. It's about survival. Because if you let them in, the plague will spread like wildfire. It will sweep through your town, burning through families, neighbors, friends. If you turn them away, they will die alone, swallowed by the cold, uncaring sea. You shout again, "Leave or we shoot." A few sailors glance nervously at the bodies. One coughs a wet, bloody cough. Another collapses. The captain finally nods, tears tracking grime down his face. The ships pull back slowly, sails flapping like black flags of surrender. The dock empties. You breathe out, trembling. You won. But at what cost? That night, you lie awake, staring at the dark ceiling. You wonder how many lives you saved by your cold choice, and how many you condemned. The plague ships will return. You know it. And next time, the choice may be even harder. You've made it this far, through plague and panic, mud and death. But survival isn't a victory lap. It's a grim parade of the broken. When you step outside your door now, the world feels less like home and more like a wasteland. Because you are not alone. Not in the way you want to be. You meet others, but only those the plague didn't take. Widows, orphans, shepherds with no flock, farmers with empty fields, and merchants with no market. They all look at you with the same question in their eyes. The one you're already asking yourself. Why you? Why did the Black Death pass your house when it tore through your neighbors? Why are you the lonely survivor in a town that feels half buried already? You shuffle past hushed whispers and haunted stares, wondering if you should answer at all. The widows move like shadows. Their husbands are gone, taken by fever, swelling, and black boils bursting like rotten fruit. Their laughter, once common and warm, is now an echo, replaced by the dull ache of loss. Some have stopped speaking entirely, their voices swallowed by grief and fear. You might pass one by the broken gate of a house, clutching a bundle of rags, her eyes vacant but still watching, as if daring the plague to come back and finish what it started. Orphans are everywhere, little faces pressed against grimy windows, eyes too old for their years. You find one curled up beside a frozen body in the street. No parents, no siblings, no one. The child's cries slice through the silence like a knife, raw and desperate. You hesitate. Touching them is a gamble with death. Ignoring them feels like losing your own soul. Most just look away. Others shuffle past, muttering prayers that fall flat in the still air. Shepherds wander the countryside now without a flock. The sheep and goats are gone, either sickened or sold off for a desperate coin. They carry no staff, no dog, just their own empty hands and a weight heavier than any burden. Loneliness. You see one sitting on a rock by the road, head bowed beneath a sun that shines too bright for the day. He's waiting for nothing but the slow creeping of shadows. Even the land seems tired. Fields lie fallow, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers that no one has the strength to pull. The village well, once a gathering spot, is now a ghost town of broken buckets and silent stones. Your footsteps echo on empty paths. The market square is silent, but for the crows, scavengers already feasting on what's left. Why you? It's the question you ask in the dark, long after the bells have stopped tolling and the last prayers have faded. Why did the plague spare your breath when so many others choked on theirs? Why does your heart still beat under a cracked and bleeding sky? Survivors aren't heroes. You aren't a lucky charm. You're just a puzzle piece that somehow didn't shatter when the world came crashing down. Sometimes you catch yourself blaming others. The neighbors who brought the sickness from a trader's ship. The witch down the road whose herbs didn't help. The priest who prayed too late or too little. You want to shout, scream, curse the air itself. But anger is a luxury few can afford. Instead, you watch as the survivors gather in small knots. Families that have been ripped apart now form fragile new bonds. A widow takes in an orphaned child. A shepherd shares what little food he has left with a stranger. Trust is a currency more precious than gold, and just as rare. Everyone knows the plague could still come back, waiting in the shadows like a hungry wolf. And sometimes it does. The fear never leaves you. Every cough in the night, Every strange rash or fever sends your mind spinning back to the darkest days. You check your body for signs, count your breaths, and pray you don't feel the weight of death settling in your bones. The law doesn't help. Justice is suspended under the shadow of death. Crimes that once brought swift and brutal punishment now go ignored. But that doesn't mean crime disappears. No, it festers, like the plague itself. In the chaos, some steal what they can to survive. Others blame their neighbors and lash out. Violence simmers under the surface, a poison that spreads as surely as any sickness. You see it when you pass the burned-out remains of a house, a fight over food turned deadly, or hear whispered rumors of a man executed for stealing bread from a corpse. Laws are harsh and execution brutal, often the only answer left in a world without mercy. But when the plague is the true executioner, what's a crime but survival? Lonely survivors live on the edge of everything. They're the ones who carry the burden of memories no one else wants to remember, the bodies they've buried with their own hands, the cries they couldn't answer, the faces they'll never see again. And still, they go on, because the plague may have stolen so much, but it cannot steal hope, or the stubborn will to live. You wonder how long you can hold on to that, how long you can walk through empty streets, passing silent homes, carrying the weight of all who are gone. The Black Death is more than a sickness. It's a wound that bleeds into every corner of your life. And the lonely survivors? They are its scars, worn like armor, but fragile as glass. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the broken world, you find yourself among them, the last remnants of a life that once was. You look up at the cold stars and ask the question again, quietly this time. Why you? The answer never comes, but still, you keep moving forward, because sometimes that's all a lonely survivor can do. You're now officially a plague refugee. The town stinks of death. The bells never stop tolling, and every time someone sneezes, 3 people start digging a grave. So you do what thousands of terrified, snot-slick peasants are doing. You run. You pack what little you own, which is to say, a wooden spoon, a ragged blanket, a crust of old bread, and a wooden bowl that smells vaguely like onions and regret. Your shoes are made of hope and disappointment. And your travel plans? Walk that direction and pray no one stabs you for looking contagious. The countryside sounds romantic until you're actually in it. Goodbye to town stink. Hello, endless mud. Fields stretch for miles, broken only by the occasional sheep, most of which now look smarter than you. Trees don't give directions. Birds don't share food. And every rustle in the underbrush might be a hungry dog or a hungrier peasant. You pass farms that were thriving 2 weeks ago. Now, they're weirdly quiet. Laundry still hangs stiffly on lines. Half-eaten stews sit cold on abandoned tables. There's a dead goat that looks like it lost an argument with a shovel. But no people. Just an eerie silence that feels louder than any city. You decide to stay moving. Everyone knows the plague travels by air, or water, or rats, or looking at someone sideways. Honestly, nobody really knows. So you walk faster. Along the way, you run into other plague tourists. Some are families, some are lone wanderers like you. All are paranoid. No one wants to get too close. One guy swings a stick at you for breathing within 10 feet. Another insists. Vinegar up the nose is a miracle cure and tries to baptize you in it. You sleep in barns when you find them, under trees when you don't. You stop caring about fleas. They're just your new bedmates now. You haven't had a warm meal since Thursday, and your bread now doubles as a weapon. It's so hard you could bludgeon a bandit with it. Speaking of bandits, yeah, they're a thing. Turns out, when the social fabric tears, some people take it as a personal challenge to make it worse. They hide in forests and ditches, looking for the next idiot, that's you, to rob. You hear stories of travelers stripped naked and sent running back to town with nothing but a leaf and a prayer. You tighten the rope on your bag and walk like someone who just buried a knife in a cousin. Confidence is the only deodorant out here. Sometimes you pass guards, not helpful ones. These are local militia types who heard about the plague and responded with checkpoint paranoia. You reach one such village gate. They have spears, too much facial hair, and the kind of sunburn that suggests they haven't washed since the last eclipse. State your business, one demands. Not dying, you reply. Honest, if not diplomatic. They glance at each other, sniff you like a suspicious cheese, and finally let you through after making you drop your bread and swear you haven't coughed in 3 days. You pass the test, but your bread fails. Rest in peace, weapon loaf. Inside the village, you try to blend in. You make up a fake name, something like Hugh Haystack or Agnes Turnip. You offer to help muck stables in exchange for soup. Most folks are too scared to talk. A few kind ones let you sit by the fire. One woman gives you a boiled onion. You cry. Partly from gratitude. Mostly because the onion is your emotional support food now. You stay a few nights. Try to be useful. Try not to look plaguey. But it doesn't last. One morning, someone dies. No one knows why. Maybe they were already sick. Maybe they ate the wrong mushroom. Maybe they just coughed the wrong way. It doesn't matter. Panic spreads faster than fleas. It was the outsider, someone shouts. Cool. That's you. Now you're being chased by people with pitchforks, bad shoes, and worse logic. You duck into the woods again, narrowly missing a hurled cabbage. That was probably dinner. You are now, officially, a public health threat and a scapegoat. Congratulations. You sleep that night in a hollow log. You name it, the Log Hilton. You hum lullabies to your remaining breadcrumbs and try not to cry too loudly. The stars are pretty if you squint. You imagine they're lanterns from a better world. Eventually, you find an abandoned cottage deep in the forest. There's no door, but at least it doesn't smell like death. You sweep out the spiders, curl up in a corner, and finally rest. You're not safe. But for tonight, you're not dead either. And in the era of the Black Death, that's what counts as a win. You survived another day, just barely. Welcome to countryside living, where the grass is greener, the threats are subtler, and the plague still might find you. Yes, and you've survived another night of coughing, sweating, and wondering whether that boil on your neck is a spider bite or something far worse. Your neighbor thinks you're cursed. Your cousin tried to bleed you with a kitchen knife. But today, you're in the care of someone who's not actively trying to kill you. Welcome to the healer's house. Now don't get too excited. This isn't a medieval spa. There's no calming lute music, no scented oils, no heated stones, unless you count the one the healer keeps by the fire to ward off spirits. You're lying on a rickety table that may once have been used to gut pigs. The smell confirms it. She enters without a word. You know her by reputation. The old woman who lives on the edge of the village, collects roots at dawn, and talks to her cat like it understands Latin. They call her wise. They also call her a witch when things go badly. Her name is irrelevant. She has survived 4 husbands, 6 winters, and at least 3 outbreaks. She is the closest thing to a miracle, in a time when miracles are in short supply. She begins her work. First, she examines the lumps under your armpit with a look of pure disappointment, like you've brought a rotten cabbage to market. She tuts. She prods. She grinds something green in a bowl with a stone that smells like regret. Then, she smears the mixture onto your skin. It burns like 1,000 sins. Will it help? You whisper. She does not answer. She is busy lighting a bundle of herbs and waving the smoke over your face while muttering words that sound suspiciously like complaints about the weather. It's medicine. Or maybe it's prayer. At this point, it's the only option that hasn't involved leeches. You glance around the room. Bottles line the walls. None are labeled. Some glow. One is moving. You decide not to ask. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary, sage, and a hint of something that smells like burnt hair. You hope it's not yours. She hands you a cup. It contains a liquid the color of ditch water. You drink it because saying no to her feels like inviting death personally into your bed. It tastes like punishment. Your throat rebels, but your stomach is too afraid to protest. Outside, the church bells toll again. Another soul lost. Another body to bury. Inside, you are being dabbed with honey, vinegar, and what might be mashed garlic. She chants again, louder this time, shaking dried leaves over your head as if you're a stew in need of seasoning. You start to feel something. Warm, dizzy, slightly on fire. It could be the herbs. It could be the fever. It could be the fact that she's drawing a circle around your body with chalk and placing stones at the corners of the room. All very normal. Then she brings out the knife. Don't panic. It's not the stabbing kind. It's the lancing kind, which is arguably worse. She tells you not to scream. You scream anyway. Pus explodes like a rotten grape. She nods approvingly, then slaps a poultice over the wound and binds it with cloth that looks suspiciously like it was once part of a curtain. You think the worst is over. It isn't. Now comes the ritual. She ties a red thread around your wrist and places a sprig of dried yarrow under your tongue. You try to speak, but she shushes you with a glare that could silence a bishop. She hums a low note. You close your eyes. In your fevered haze, time slips. Hours pass, maybe days. The house is both cave and sanctuary. People come and go. Some walk out alive. Some are carried. The healer never changes. Her hands are always working. Mixing, stitching, blessing, scolding. You hear her argue with a priest once. She wins. On the 3rd day, or maybe the 5th, you open your eyes to find a cat sitting on your chest. It blinks at you as if judging your chances. You ask it if you'll live. It sneezes and walks away. The healer returns. She presses your forehead, grunts, and nods. She removes the thread, tosses the yarrow, and feeds you something warm and slightly edible. You eat, you sleep, you live, or you don't. Because here's the truth. Some people make it, some don't. The healer doesn't promise miracles. She just gives you a chance. In a world where the church bells never stop tolling and death walks the streets in broad daylight, that's all anyone can ask for. You thank her weekly. She grumbles something about useless boys and sends you on your way with a pouch of herbs and a strict warning not to bathe under the full moon. You nod. You don't ask questions. You didn't die today. But tomorrow is another story. Thanks for listening. If you're already asleep, great. We've successfully lulled you to sleep. And if you're still awake, well, that's impressive. If you genuinely enjoy these boring stories about history, feel free to subscribe to our channel whenever you're in the mood. Sleep well, and good night.